Good afternoon. I'm here with John Farchette of the East End Marine Park, who is going to talk about what St. Croix really is. What is St. Croix, John?
So St. Croix is actually a sub-reef platform that rose above the water in 134 million years ago during the late Cretaceous period. They believe that movement began in the late Jurassic, but by the late Cretaceous, it had actually brought up this sub-reef platform that existed at 2,000 feet below sea level to the surface. And this occurred in the Galapagos. And the island, along with other parts of the Caribbean plate, moved out of the west of Ecuador on the South American continent and moved into the Caribbean basin we know it today. The island is still moving 1 inch a year to the east, and it is still rising out of the ocean because of this subduction that is occurring north of us at the Puerto Rican Trench, 100 miles north of Puerto Rico, a 33,000 feet deep subduction zone.
And what is that? What is subduction?
So a subduction zone is where two plates collide, and so the larger plate goes under the smaller plate, and it lifts that smaller plate up, and that would be St. Croix.
Okay, awesome. And what exactly kind of soil or rock is the most prominent on St. Croix? Are we a volcanic rock, or what are we?
Although we do find some molten rock, we are not volcanic in nature. Since we were an uplift, the whole plate lifted. We actually have what's called turbidite. So that's a rock that's formed under heat and pressure. But most rocks do. But the turbidite actually has a lot of iron in it, but it also has, so it was a turbid water. So the way sedimentary rock is formed is sediment falls on the bottom of a lake in a horizontal plane, and then it just layers and layers and layers. And depending on the sediment that goes into the lake, that sediment now has these, looks like a layered cake. And so these many layers then under heat and pressure is formed. But because it was turbid lake, either stream or for some reason was moving, it did not have a good compaction. So it tends to fracture a lot. So we call it rotten rock, but what it is just a fractured rock that was formed out of turbid waters, or turbidite. That's the name that they've given. But we also have, of course, something called caliche, which is a marine. It's a marine clay. So that's made up of decaying plants and animals in the ocean.
Okay.
And that's why the calcium carbonate color that it has, a limestone, and that's why that bleach white color that you see is from a marine environment, where land-based soils and clays have a darker color because of the soil. So the color of the soil is different because of decaying plants of terrestrial animals and plants, and that's why you have those two contrasts.
Very interesting. What about the other Virgin Islands? Are we all composed of the same
Well, starting
material?
with St. Kitts, actually Mount Norrois. So Mount Norrois is a seamountain just northeast of us, about 43 miles northeast of us. And it's a seamount, so it's a mountain under the water that comes up, but it doesn't quite break the surface of the ocean. And that was discovered by nautiluslive.org. So that is an experimental vessel by Bob Ballard, and what they did, they went down to that known mount, and they've determined that based on its morphology and its geomorphology, that it was a volcano, a dead volcano. So starting with Norrois, we got Ceiba, we got St. Kitts, we got Nevis, we have Montserrat, Guadeloupe, Dominica, Martinique, St. Lucia, the Grenadines, and of course Barbados. But Barbados is not. So those islands have 14 volcanoes in them.
Oh, okay.
So that's our rim of fire, and that occurs from the friction that occurs during the subduction. So just like in the Pacific, there's one over by the Marianas. They've got a ring of fire. We've got our ring of fire, which is that archipelago going south to the Grenada, which they have an underwater volcano called Kikumjeni that is still alive.
Oh, I've heard of
That
it.
experimental vessel went there and went into that volcano and documented the animals that were living in very high
Oh.
acidic water and very hot water coming out of the vent was coming out. And they say it is an active volcano.
Awesome. Awesome. Very interesting. Thank you so much for your time. We could go on and on and on. So I'm going to have to come back to you.
And this is because of the work done by D.K. Hubbard, who was
Okay.
a geologist who got his PhD here in St. Croix at the West Indies Labs, the Farley Dickinson University. He's now teaching at Oberlin, and he
Okay.
brings students down still to get sediment cores and show that this sedimentary rock that is formed in the horizontal plane is actually vertical, which then proves the violence that St. Croix morphology occurred,
Wow.
forcing this sedimentary rock into a 90-degree lift.
Okay. Great. Thank you again.